man in the attic. I had never believed in ghosts or the supernatural, but that all changed the night I moved into my new apartment. It was a cozy little place, perfect for a fresh start. The rent was surprisingly low, which should have been my first warning. The landlord, a quiet old man, seemed eager to hand over the keys. On my first night, as I was unpacking, I heard a faint creaking sound coming from the attic. I brushed it off as the house settling and continued with my work. Hours later, just as I was about to fall asleep, the sound returned, louder this time. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next night, the noises started again, more insistent and accompanied by a soft shuffling. I decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed the narrow stairs to the attic. The air grew colder with each step, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. When I reached the top, I hesitated, my hand trembling on the doorknob. I pushed the door open, the creaking louder than ever in the silence. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing stacks of old boxes and forgotten furniture. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but then I saw him. A man stood in the corner, his back turned to me. He was tall and thin, wearing tattered clothes that hung off his skeletal frame. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. The man didn't move. I stepped closer, heart pounding in my chest. "Hey, you can't be here," I said, more forcefully this time. Still, he remained motionless. Summoning my courage, I reached out to tap his shoulder. As soon as my fingers brushed his clothing, he turned. His face was a grotesque mask of decayed flesh and hollow eyes that stared right through me. I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight, which rolled away and plunged the room into darkness. In the pitch black, I could hear him moving closer, the sound of his ragged breathing growing louder. Panic surged through me, and I scrambled for the flashlight. When I finally found it and flicked it back on, the man was gone. The attic was empty. I bolted downstairs and spent the rest of the night huddled on the couch, unable to sleep. The next morning, I confronted the landlord. He sighed deeply and looked away. "You're not the first," he admitted. "A long time ago, a man died up there, trapped and forgotten. His spirit lingers, seeking release. I moved out that same day. I still don't know what I saw or why he appeared to me, but I do know this. Some places are haunted, and some spirits never find peace." Story 2. The Mirror. It was an antique shop, the kind filled with dusty treasures and hidden gems. I had always been a sucker for old things, so when I spotted the ornate mirror tucked away in the corner, I couldn't resist. Its frame was intricately carved with vines and flowers, and the glass was surprisingly clear. The shop owner warned me about it. "That mirror has a history," she said, her eyes serious. "People say it shows more than just your reflection." I laughed it off and bought it anyway. That night, I hung it in my bedroom. At first, it was just a mirror, reflecting my everyday life. But soon, strange things started happening. I would catch glimpses of movement out of the corner of my eye, shadows that didn't belong. One night, as I was brushing my hair, I saw someone standing behind me in the mirror. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure was still there, closer now. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes dark and hollow. She stared at me, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. Terrified, I covered the mirror with a sheet and tried to forget about it. But every night, I could hear her whispering, a soft, urgent murmur that seemed to seep into my dreams. I started seeing her in my nightmares, always standing just out of reach, her eyes pleading. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I ripped the sheet off the mirror and shouted, "What do you want?" The woman in the mirror pointed to a spot on the wall behind me. I turned and saw nothing but bare plaster. When I looked back, she was still pointing, her eyes full of desperation. I grabbed a hammer and started to chip away at the wall. It didn't take long before I found a small, hidden compartment. Inside was an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. I opened it and began to read. The journal belonged to the woman in the mirror. She had been murdered, her body hidden in the walls of the house. She had been waiting, trapped, for someone to find her and tell her story. As I read, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I looked up to see her standing beside me, her face calm for the first time. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then she was gone, and the mirror shattered into 1,000 pieces. I called the police, and they found her remains where the journal said they would be. She was finally at peace, and so was I. Story 3. The Forgotten Doll. When I was a child, my grandmother gave me a porcelain doll. It was beautiful, with curly blonde hair and a frilly pink dress. I named her Lily and placed her on a shelf in my room. As I grew older, I forgot about Lily, leaving her to gather dust. Years later, after my grandmother passed away, I moved back into her old house. The memories came flooding back, and so did the strange occurrences. It started with small things, objects misplaced, strange noises at night. Then one day, I found Lily sitting on my bed, even though I hadn't touched her in years. I put her back on the shelf, but the next morning, she was on the bed again. Her glassy blue eyes seemed to follow me around the room, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me. I started to hear whispers at night, soft voices that seemed to come from the direction of the doll. One night, I woke up to the sound of giggling. I turned on the light and saw Lily standing at the foot of my bed. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out to pick her up. Her porcelain face felt cold and lifeless, but her eyes seemed almost alive. I decided to get rid of her. I took her to the attic and placed her in an old trunk, locking it tight. For a while, things were quiet. But then the dreams started. I would see Lily in my sleep, her eyes filled with anger and betrayal. She would whisper to me, telling me to come back, to let her out. One night, the whispers were so loud that they woke me up. I went to the attic, driven by a force I couldn't understand. The trunk was open, and Lily was gone. Panic set in as I searched the house. I found her in my grandmother's old room, sitting in the rocking chair. As I approached, the chair started to rock on its own. Lily's eyes seemed to glow in the darkness. I heard my grandmother's voice, soft and soothing, telling me that Lily was special, that she had protected our family for generations. But now she was angry, and I had to make amends. I didn't know what to do. I picked up Lily and felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. I carried her back to my room and placed her on the bed. "I'm sorry," I whispered, hoping she could hear me. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother. She smiled at me and told me that Lily forgave me. When I woke up, the doll was back on the shelf, her eyes peaceful once more. The whispers stopped, and the house felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. I still don't understand what happened, but I know one thing. Some things are never truly forgotten, and some bonds can never be broken.